We are working on this brand new app, The Bakery. Just gonna CD into this bad boy. And what this bakery has, that we're about to build, is two different models, and that is, we're gonna generate those models, all right? And it is going to be for a muffin. Oh my God, yo, how messed up would this be? Oh no. Yo, I'm out of curiosity. We can always just redo it, right? How messed up would this be? What do you think Rails will do? Rails G model muffin, all right? Do you think it'll be okay if I did that? I've never done it, but you know what? Risk it, brisket. Let's go.
It'll either work or it'll error. It's smart enough to error out.
It's smart enough to error out, or it'll just power through like the champ that it is. Oh my God. Wow. Let's take a look.
You need to grab that U a few times. Wow.
Bless up. Except we made a boo-boo, and that is we gave it 0 attributes. So we can Rails delete the model. Oh man, yeah, I'm gonna have to do that again. Bloop, bloop. And it'll just completely wipe it for us. Ooh, wow. Rails. Just kidding, I actually want to do that muffin, but now I want to give it some attributes off the bat. So what are the attributes of the muffin? Flavor, very good. Flavor. Anything else? Do I have to put in string here?
No.
Ooh, learn quick. Anything else about the muffin?
Baker ID.
Right, the muffin belongs to a baker. And so if you ever forget, the belongs to has the foreign key, and all you have to do is ask yourself this question, right? And that is, if the muffin belongs to the baker, which baker? Baker number 1? Baker number foreign key? Definitely need. So I'm gonna put a baker ID.
Is it okay to create this
Through references?
before you
Oh, never mind. No. Nothing. I didn't say anything. Huh?
Is it okay to create this before you create the baker?
Yeah, it's probably fine.
Okay.
It's probably fine.
Probably.
But let's make the baker first, right? Because that makes a lot of sense. Rails G model, baker. And what are the attributes of baker? As in nominate, very good. And?
Hairy arms, Boolean.
Okay. Now that I'm thinking about it, as disgusting as that sounds, I believe a lot of my baker friends have arms that,
Yeah.
How many bakers
It's a
are
trend.
there?
I was going to say that are warm in the winter. I'm not going to describe them in any other way. And I think that that's okay, right? We can leave that alone. All right. Cool. So let's get back to this, the muffin, right? We talked about a flavor, and we talked about this baker ID. But what this muffin will belong to is it can do something like this. Ooh. I think it's reference. Reference?
Oh, don't forget to replace the T with the G.
Oh, you're right. Ooh, that would have been muy malo. References, I think baker. I believe that is right?
That's what I would try.
Right. We'll see if it errors out. We'll see what this does. Ready? Wowzers! It worked. Let's see what it built for us. Muffin, baker, okay. Let's take a look at that DB. Okay. Bakers, normal. That's really funny, huh?
Yeah.
Ooh, what is that? What is that? Who has an idea?
ID, I mean, I guess, the reference to the ID of the.
Right. So this references basically. I thought it was going to do something else. Like,
I think it shouldn't be keep that reference to baker.
oh my goodness, I put it in backwards. Yeah, that is incorrect. That is incorrect. I was hoping it was going to do like that index, right? Yeah, that's why it looked wrong. So what we have to do now is we have to get rid of that thing. Let's get rid of that. Okay.
Is that G with D?
Embarrassing. Boop. If I blast this, I think it just blasts the class. Yeah, it did. This file should no longer exist. Don't save. And don't save. All right, cool. Let's do this. Rails G, and it should be Baker, right? References. That should be correct. Let's find out. Yeah, that's the one.
Ooh, yowza.
Yeah. So let's actually test this and find out what is the dealio. I'm going to make a brand new baker. Does anyone want to be a baker? Oh no. What happened here? Why am I getting this no tables? I did created the migration.
You didn't migrate.
That's right. So Rails DB migrate. Okay, didn't like that. Only allow case. Oh. Okay, so it didn't like that. I have to get rid of it. No muffins. I knew it was gonna bite me. It's gonna bite me. Cool. Let's get rid of that. So now we know. Don't have too much fun in lecture. Great.
No fun allowed.
Not just lectures, no whole shebang.
No food allowed.
The migrate file. The migrate still has.
Oh, let's just delete it altogether. Oh, dang it. I have to rename. Yeah, I liked it too. That was kind of. Uh-oh. Yes. Do you guys know how to do that?
Did you option?
Oh, is it because this was messed up?
Just because the file name of the migration still hasn't moved on.
Oh, okay. All right. So now we can Rails D model. Oops. I need this umlaut somewhere. All right. Rails G model muffin, and it was flavor, and then baker references. Cool. Okay. So look, under muffins, it automatically puts in this belongs to, which is vmoney, right? And then inside bakers, I'm sorry, it said this references baker, foreign key true, Rails migrate.
Does the baker.rb file have the any?
It does not. That would be really nice, right? If it did that for you. There is a way to do it, but that's not important today. Has many muffin or muffins? Wow, that was intense and aggressive. I like it. Great. So I'm actually going to go into the console and kind of test this out and explain kind of what's happening. So if I make a brand new baker, baker.create. Does anyone want to be a baker?
Yes.
Sure. Nikole.
Amazing.
Nice. Okay. And then do you have, okay, this is you can just tell me whatever you want, you know. Yes, very. And what kind of nonsense do I get myself into? I'm gonna get fired one day. Anyone else?
I'll be there. Come on.
Okay. Simon?
No hairy arms.
Yeah, baby arms. Baby arms.
Or a sea lion? I went to the zoo on Saturday, so I learned the difference between the two.
Yeah, big weekend.
I did.
Really?
Yeah. All right. The Central Park Zoo was delightful. Okay, great. So now let's make some muffins. Muffins, excuse me. Oh, wow. That was not right.
Bring back the memories.
Baker.create. Okay, what flavor and who wants to make this?
Lemon. Me, please.
Huh?
Lemon.
Lemon?
Yeah.
Oops. All right, we're done. I think I should just end this. I did. Okay. Oh, that was disgusting. All right.
I thought you were joking.
I was not. No. As long as you see this, that means you're stuck in a quotation. And so I tried getting out of it here, and then didn't like it. Then I double quoted, and then I ended it again. But anyways, muffin.create. And we want the flavor to be lemon. So let's take a look at what this baker is, right? You have baker ID, but then inside your schema, it says this references. What that means is that you can actually reference the table entirely by its object. What it will look for under the hood through its magic is the foreign key. So if I wanted to, I can put in a baker like one. baker ID for 1, or I can pass in the baker itself, right? And it literally says expected like an instance. So if I did something like baker.find and I passed in 1, right, which would give me the baker object, that should also work. So this references allows you to do what is under the hood, sort of like this shortcut for like this belongs to. But what I'd really like you to look into is how Rails actually does this. And I think a really cool blog post would be understanding what something is indexed in the database and how Active Record does its indexing, specifically something called the N+1 problem. I think that'd be really cool to look into. If anyone wants to talk about it afterwards, we can even do like a side sort of piece on that afterwards. All right, but I think the references is just kind of like a cool syntactical shortcut. So let's continue. We got all this all set up, and now we're inside. And so we need, oh my goodness, we don't even have a controller. It's ridiculous. None of these views would work. So how do I fix that?
Rails G.
All right, I'm just gonna make a controller specifically for what?
Bakers.
For the bakers or the muffins? Ooh, oh. Bakers?
What's that bakers?
Muffins. Why do I need a controller for both? That is some good logic. But the idea is that, yes, they should exist for a controller, but more specifically,
You're going to show them both on the web page.
they are connected, but let's take a look very carefully. And that is inside the Rails G controller, the controller is the helper that builds the views folder. God bless you. The controller builds the views folder, meaning the controller is the go-between for the model and the views. So I will need a controller if I ever plan on displaying something for a model. Otherwise, I can essentially kind of just have a model. But a controller has the logic for what the responses should be. You know how every time we go into one of these things, I'm like, great, let's do one. And then it's like def index. It could be something like, what do I need from the model? And then specifically, what is the response? So this is kind of very useful. All right, so moving on, right? Let's actually just dive right into kind of what the plan for today is. I don't want to bore you with like index and show and some of the other CRUD functionalities because I think you have a good grasp on it. Let's actually just jump right into it. The bakers is the has many or the belongs to? The has many, right? So when I create one, just like we did inside the Rails console, there's no real association attribute to it. The one that has the association is going to be the muffins, and that's the one that's going to be a little bit more fun to build. So let's build new. And then what else do we need with new? To make a new muffin. We need this create action, right? So here inside the new, I have something from the model. And then the response. So what do I need inside of my new? Inside the new action, inside the controller, what do I need from the model? Because the response should be that sort of render new, right, under the hood. What do I need from the new? I don't actually need anything, potentially, at the moment. So let's think through inside the views, specifically inside the muffins. Let's build this new.erb. What do I need inside here to create a brand new muffin? How do I pull that user input? I think you're jumping ahead, but how do I pull the data from a user? Do I just get down chomp inside here? I need that form, right? So which form should I be using? Form for or form tag? Why tag and why form for?
Form 4 would be easier because you can just create that. It's going to pull the attribute with the active record, so you can just say f dot label and then name it f dot text.
Yeah, remember the form for, right, requires sort of an object. There's an argument here. And so do I have access to what I'm trying to build for, which is a muffin. Do I have access to it right now?
No.
No, let's go back to that muffins controller and let's
Oh.
give it, right? And what is this? Should I be like doing a muffin.find over here?
Then you muffin.new, right?
Why would I use muffin.new?
Because when you run the new thing, every time you're creating a new one, you want to make a new instance. And at the end of it, you
Right.
want to create.
So inside of the form for, I need this sort of like dummy, this shell that I'm going to be passing into the form for helper so that when I do something like this, whoops, muffin, actually I'm going to get rid of this. I now have like all these like pre-built things. It's going to use the route helper and it's going to use the object to kind of build out some of the fields here. So what are the attributes of this muffin? We have flavor, right? But what else is important? We probably should do f.label like I've talked about in terms of that accessibility, right? I'm gonna do one for flavor. And then what other one do we need? Should I use not a text field, but like a number field for baker ID?
Would that be number
Oops.
or integer?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's not
This
a
is gonna be a
label.
label. And what goes here? Is it integer field? No, I think it's number field or num field. I think it's number.
It's like
Let's spin it up and find out. F.submit. Submit.
number is like HTML language.
We'll see. Localhost 3000 slash. How do I get to this new? Slash new? It should be slash muffins slash new. Does that route exist? So what's gonna happen? Yeah, it'll say like there's no such route, get to slash muffins new. So I need to build one. Get to slash muffins slash new.
Wouldn't you just do resources and then
What did I say about that very specifically on Friday?
don't do it?
Why?
Because it sucks.
No, it was super magical.
The 7 routes.
Because we don't
It
learn it.
automatically builds all the routes for you.
So why don't you
Right.
why don't you just do resources only new?
Now we're getting it, right? So instead of hard coding it, right, if it's one of the RESTful routes, we can do that. So I would point to the muffins controller, specifically a method called new, or I can do resources muffins, and I can pass it only the new. Now that that's done, let's actually make a request to muffins new. What is this error? Why do I have an undefined method muffins path?
We need to redirect it.
Not exactly. Look at the line it errors out on. How much did we go into form 4 yesterday? Friday. Okay. I'm going to solve this error. We're going to talk about the associations and we'll go back into this. What? Not exactly. There is an action there. Let's do this. It'll fix the error and then I'll talk about it later.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. So we have this like very, very well styled form here. It's a flavor and it's a baker and it's a number. Right? So in my flavor, I can have poppy seed, right? I always like spell this wrong. Sometimes I put this and that's okay. So I have poppy seed here and I have like baker 7, baker 1, baker 2. This becomes the same problem that we ran into in Sinatra associations where like, is this a good user experience? Right? Like, should a user know what ID they want associated with the baker? Specifically, we also don't have login yet. So how can I create this? What did we do last time that was like a better user experience?
Do like dot name, whatever.
We dot named whatever? Not exactly, but we did something with dot name. We did a drop down, right? And then we interpolated every single one of those names. So just like Rails builds helpers for your forms, it just builds helpers for your buttons with that button to action. And then it also built the anchor tag with link to. Rails has a helper for everything. So let's see the Rails drop down way. I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. How do I have a drop-down select field in Rails form? Huh. What is this? Look, oh my gosh. That check plus. Look at the Rails documentation. You can do something called f.collection select. Huh. Interesting. Let's take a look at the documentation over here. Ooh, wow. It even dropped to collection select? Wow, that was a good link. It really was a good link. This is how collection select works. You have a belongs to, and then you have a has many. And then you have some helper method in there. Okay, cool. All right. And it looks like some sample usage. Oh, bless up to examples. I have something called collection select, and it takes in a bazillion arguments here. If you do it correctly, it looks like it builds the Volvo select dropdown for us. Right? I said Volvo because that's the example that we pulled from the HTML W3 schools. Remember? And so if I do this correctly, it builds this. So I'm going to try my best to do is point out what part is building what, then we'll build it ourselves, and then we'll break it. So hopefully it makes a lot more sense afterwards. So the first thing I see is this argument called post. So let's take a look at where post is in here. Okay, I have post. First thing I see is inside the name, it creates that nested post params for me, which is really important because I want to be able to use the strong params sort of like programming pattern that we've built. And that is inside, I'm going to do params.require, right? And I need that nested hash first inside. Are you following along? Okay. And then inside here, I need to know what the name of the attribute is. So here I'm giving it the foreign key. So these two combined build the nested params with the key of post, with a nested key of author ID, which is what I'm looking for. And it also gives it a unique ID by combining them, post author ID. And that's okay. Now, what do I actually want to go through? Well, inside this, for the post, I want to be able to select which author I want. So in our example, right, for a muffin, I want to select which baker I want to do. So here I should be doing something like baker.all, right? This ID looks like what is being interpolated in terms of the values here. And then I see name with initial, which I'm not sure exactly where that might have potentially come from. And that's actually a custom method that returns a string inside the author class. And then something called prompt true. Okay, cool. Wonder what that does. Let's rip that. All right? And let's actually make it our own. Remember, it's all about being able to read and understand documentation. And if you didn't have like a great explanation from somebody, then the right move is to kind of take a guess, take your hypothesis, rip the code, make it your own, and see what it does, right? You want to be able to read something, try your best to understand it, build it, break it, love it, learn it, and be here. Developers. So inside the new, what I really want to do is just kind of rip this code. That didn't look like it highlighted. It looked like a Ruby. That's not something Steven says, just so you know. So post here inside of our example is going to be that belongs to. So I'm assuming then our belongs to is muffin. So I'm going to change this to muffin, right? It's not author ID, but instead it should be the what? Oh, the Bakar. I'm sorry. Wow. Even I forgot my own language. And it's not author all. We're going through all of the bakers. And I'm just going to leave ID. Name with initial is not a method that we built in here. So what can I do with this? What returns sort of like a string that makes sense to us instead of this name with initial that takes in first name and last name? What can we do? Right. On the has many class, which is the baker, what attribute of baker makes sense to kind of identify them? The name, right? So I'm just going to put name in here. I'm going to leave prompt true, and I'm just going to like see what's going on. Cool. So if I refresh, all of a sudden I see my baker, right, with the numbers, right? That can be kind of confusing, so I'm just going to go in and go, swoop, gone. Now I have this baker, Nicole and Simon, which is great. Oh my God, it worked. Let's take a look a little bit closer at the HTML that it built for us. I have a select with a muffin at a key of baker ID. Ooh, spicy. And then if I open it, I have all these options. Please select. The thing about this is you want to be able to like go in and break down everything so you'll understand what it does. What do you think prompt true means in terms of it asking you for a prompt? What do you think that builds for you? Right, the first default option of please select. So if I take this out, right, and just go, I don't like that. Let me just get rid of that prompt true.
Well, what if you just do prompt false?
It breaks, bizarre. So let me do prompt. Does it though?
I think you deleted the parentheses.
I delete the parentheses, yeah. If I put false, notice how it doesn't have that please select on there. I believe you're correct. If I don't delete the parentheses, prompt would be by default false, by default. So that's basically what prompt does. And if we take a look at it, look, it doesn't even have that option anymore. So prompt true, we've basically figured out what it does, right? You feel comfortable with prompt true? Yeah, should be pretty good. So there it is, please select. So we figured out what this does, right? Now, collection select for muffin. Let's actually take a look. What else can I possibly pass in for this? If you don't know, you can put I don't know. Let's just see what the error is and try to infer, interpolate. So if I hit I don't know, it still works. So it doesn't need it to build properly, but what changed?
There's a class called, a model called don't know.
It won't assume that a model's called don't know, but what it will do is it will take that and it will pre-pend it to this. And that is the name and the ID. And this is useful for us because remember how the params are going to come across. Let's actually check those params. If I go back to my Muffins controller, I'm going to drop a, is it binding pry for Rails? Bybug. Bless up. And with the bybug, let's actually submit this form, right? I'm going to pick a flavor, and that is tasty1 for fun. And I'm going to make Nicole make this tasty one. If I hit create muffin, I notice that it's hanging and like along with my million tabs. And I'm in the create action. So far, so good. So if I'm in the create action, how did it know to hit the create action? Does my route exist?
Yeah, you have to.
Well, it's because I use this, right? I use the resources. It built all 7 REST routes. Again, we're going to touch back into this. But what are the params? What is the params that I'm looking for? Don't know came out specifically as this param. Is that correct? No. So if I wanted params, right, remember what the strong params are. If I do params.require, what am I going to be requiring? Muffin, the object, right? Is it going to give me all of my params that I really want? No. What should this have been? Instead of don't know, what should have Baker ID fell under? The muffin params. So let's go back and kind of fix that real quick. So if I go back to my new, and I, instead of put don't know, which is obnoxious, I put muffin again. Let me exit out of here. Let me go back to new. Let me put tasty number 2, and let's put Simon on that. Actually, I gotta refresh. Put tasty 2, or tasty 3. Simon, create muffin. I'm back in the bybug. Let's check those params. Specifically, the params that require at a key of muffin. So I've added this Baker ID to my parameters under the nested key of muffin. So now my strong param should be working.
I have a question about strong params, which is that it seems like when you want to make a parameter strong, you would have to reference it specifically rather than the nested hash, because you want to like list this
You're going to whitelist every single one of them.
Yeah, so rather than, so it's a bit confusing when you're saying that when for the strong params, you would just like put in muffin, and then you would get like all of the however many thousand attributes of the muffin.
It'll never be like 1,000 because your form would just be insanely long. You're dealing with at most like maybe like 5, 10 options.
Right.
And that's okay to put
And then
5 or
you-
10
right,
specific
and then you
whitelist
can
tabs.
type them in.
Yep.
So when you would actually be doing this for like, security purposes, you would do like params don't require, and then you do like muffin, add a key, and you would do like
Flavor and baker ID. Those would be the
Right,
keys.
So you do like muffin, add flavor, and then comma, muffin, add baker ID.
No, it would just be permit and then specifically the attributes you want to permit, like flavor.
Okay.
If I did not put baker ID, it only gives me flavors permitted. If I put flavor and I put baker ID, it's going to give me both to be permitted.
Okay.
Yeah. And so these are kind of like, these are the strong params that we're going to be building.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So back to collection select, right? So we've identified what muffin does. And let's take a look at what baker ID does. If we don't know what it does, let's just exit out of here. We'll go back to new. Let's go and build what baker ID. Okay, let's put something else instead of baker ID. Cool? And let's,
Bananas. Said something else.
yeah, sure, bananas. B-A-N-A-B-A-N-A-N-A-S. Thank you. ID. If I refresh. This one, however, says undefined method banana IDs for a muffin. So this one will break if you do not put in the correct attribute. The first one won't, but the second one will. So let's take a look at what it's trying to do. Under bananas ID, right?
That's an active record thing.
Yes. What it's going to do, right, is I have this muffin object. I want to call a method here on this muffin object, and whatever the value is what's going to be interpolated. So for example, on muffin, what are my other attributes? I don't remember actually. Flavor. Cool. So back to new, there is something called flavor. And that is if I put flavor here, let's see what it builds. Okay, interesting. Look at this, muffin at a key of flavor. So this is all it does for us. It builds in the nested params hash for us. What do I want to come across as the params, right? Once I have muffin as my sort of parent key, what is the specific params that I'm passing in? So this one, I actually want that baker ID. That's what I want to put in. If we,
Could you could reference it using the flavor, couldn't you? If you switch the other thing? If you switch the other thing to flavor?
no, if this is flavor and this is flavor, only one is going to get sent through because it's going to override it. We'll talk about it later unless you're genuinely
Okay,
confused
yeah.
on what's happening. Okay. So this is a method call on the object. So I'm going to put back baker ID. Does baker ID exist as a method on the muffin?
Yes.
Yeah, it's that getter method, right? So this is why this makes sense and this is why this works. Now we have baker.all. I'm not sure how much Steven might have told you, but inside the views, right, the view should not be touching the model. The view should not be touching the model. So in that MVC architecture, the controller is the go-between between the model and the view. And here, baker.all is actually a query to the database. So we don't want the view to query the database. Why? Think about it like this. The view is directly what gets sent to the user. Anything that touches the user directly, do you want the user to interact directly with your database in any way, shape, or form? Well, of course not, right? I mean, we trust them, of course, but, you know, do we though? So, remember, baker.all is directly querying the database, right? And this right here is a view file. The view file goes directly to the client as sent back as a response, and sort of, even though the user's not really writing anything, you don't really want the user touching the database or the model directly as sort of any interaction. So is there any way we can get baker.all into the view file without the view controller doing it? Wouldn't it be nice if we had something like bakers?
Yeah.
Oh my God, how can we now adjust the code accordingly?
Go to
Controller.
Right, and so inside the new, we also need bakers, baker.all. And that is like sort of that refactor where we can continue to follow the MVC principles. So no big deal, but the Rails doc, boo. Not really, just when you see this, right, just make sure you refactor that. Cool. So back to the new, right? All right, any questions on like what this is? This is the iteration that you want to go through. Cool. It's looking for like a collection. So if I put 1, 2, and 3, let's see what happens. All right, it'll break. It says undefined method name for a fixed num. What is happening here now? Why would it call something called name for each one of these numbers?
iterate through to get the name for the compound.
Let's take a look at this now. And now if we take a look, how did we get Nicole and Simon? Right, dot name is the method that gets called on each one of these objects that then becomes what is the text in the option. So when I put in the array, like 1, 2, 3, it's gonna try to do dot name on number 1, dot name on number 2, dot name on number 3, which obviously is gonna say there's undefined method name for each one of these objects, and so it can't actually type in what's here. Right, like 1.name is not going to make any sense. Cool. That being said, though, let's play with this to make sure we fully understand. All right, we're at bakers. All right, what is another method for each one of these bakers?
Hairy arms.
Right, so we can put hairy arms. And what that would give us now is in these options, you should see something like true and false, right? If that is in fact what it's doing. So it's a method call on each of the objects that interpolates the text for each one of these options. Right? That's kind of cool, right? It's really powerful. So what do you think ID now is doing? What is the last sort of value that ID is doing? It's doing the same thing, right? So if I were to try my best to see what collection select is doing, is it's going to do this. Inside here, I'm just going to put some comments. And that is, it's going to build, actually, let's do this. It's going to build, is it a sneeze or?
No, hiccup.
Okay, so we have option. I'm sorry, we have select. And then each one of these have options, right? So it's going to do this. It's going to take at bakers. Are you okay? Yeah. B is for baker. And it's going to do this end, right? So what it's going to do is right here, for each one of these bakers, it's going to call this method. It's going to do b.id. Don't worry about the Ruby interpolation. This is just me explaining what's happening.
Okay.
And then here, it's going to do b.hairyarms, because that's what I'm telling it to do. Here, for a class, it's going to ignore that, and it's going to look for, oh, it's already there. Embarrassing. It's going to combine these two. The first one is Muffin. And then inside, it's going to go, ooh, is that a baker ID?
Oh,
Oh, actually, that's it. I thought there was one more. Oh, and prompt true. We all know what that does. So this is what's actually happening for collection select. So if I wanted to change any one of these, all right, what I actually want the text to be is not whether or not you have hairy arms. That's crazy. It should be the name. So now it's going to do b.name. And that's what's going on. So the collection select builds you this select with options dropdown. Who feels a lot more comfortable with all of these collection select options? Cool. I'm not expecting you to memorize it, but what I am expecting you is to be able to take collection select and apply it to your application so you can build the dropdown.
So it's just a seriously jam-packed method.
It's a seriously jam-packed method.
Let it go over, basically.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. Rails. Right? And so text, I mean, comments on HTML are usually really iffy. Let's see if it breaks. Oh, it didn't. Okay. Sometimes when you have comments in your HTML, your AV file, Rails is like, nah, I don't like that. Just delete it entirely. But yeah, I'm going to leave it in here for you so you can kind of understand what's happening. Yeah? All right. So what we'll do is this. We will take a quick break because I know you're kind of tired, maybe want to the bathroom, whatever, and drink not an energy drink. And then we'll come back and I'll explain the Form 4, the helper, and why the routes sort of break because of it. Cool? All right, let's take a break. All right. No, he's a cool guy. All right, cool. So let's get into what is going on here, specifically as we are refreshing and everything seems to be working out fine. Let's take a look at what the route is for the Form 4. What we notice is that it's going to be a post specifically to /muffins. Now, if we remove the resources muffins and kind of refresh, let's see what it's complaining about. It seems to say something along the lines of no route match. Okay, that was not the one I was looking for. Great. Now it's great. Let's see what it's complaining of. There it is. Okay, undefined muffins path for this sort of looks like a class, nested class object, right?
So
And you're kind of like,
it's not even getting to the post.
it's not even passing this line. Look at where it's highlighting. It's highlighting line 1, and it's saying there's no method called muffins path for like this class sort of class, which is interesting. Rails does a lot for you under the hood that you already kind of can tell. So what we can do is we can fix that, and that is it's looking for a muffins path. So on the Form 4, instead of letting it default to however it wants to do the routing, we can actually force it to be a certain way. And that is, I went through the Rails docs, I found Form 4, and look at kind of what it's looking for by default. The articles path. That's what it's taking in by default under the hood without even giving it an argument. It's very implicit. So if I give it an argument like comma URL, and I say, why don't you just get to /no? My name is no. My number is no. Sorry about that. Look at where it goes to. It will post to /no because I've hard-coded that route. I can also probably hard-code a route like, I don't know, let's say the muffins path. Because those path helpers are doing that for us. And what error do you think I'll get? Whenever it decides to finally, get there. Oh my goodness, there it is. Undefined muffins path for that class. It's the exact same error. So what I really need is inside my routes, I need something like a get to / pointing to really any sort of controller action, but let's put the muffins going to, I don't know, say index or something, as the muffins path. Oh, I'm not going to do that. Because what would happen if I did that? Muffins path, right? So if I refresh again, what you'll see is that all of a sudden it goes to and it's going to because I'm telling it if you ever use the muffins path, it's going to do a get to right? So what if I change this to form submit path? That would mean that inside the code, from new, I would use the form submit path. Does that make sense? Like the helper is what I'm building. So if I refresh, it should in fact run just as fine. So the reason I need this helper is because the Form 4 will use the muffins path by default. It uses it by default. And remember, when we had this bad boy over here, what does this bad boy do for us? It builds not only the 7 RESTful routes, but it will also build all the helpers as muffin path for the show, as muffin's path for the index, as new muffin path for the new. And so that's why when I use resources, the form for sort of works. Cool?
So
Let's take a look at the routes.
should we use, so should we use
Resources?
or still no?
Okay, let's clear that up. I would suggest using resources. However, do not use all of them if you don't need them. So in my controller, I have a new and a create. If I see something like this, resources muffins, and it's not something like only where it's new and create, then what I'm assuming is one of two things. If I do not have this code block, I'm assuming you're either missing the other 5 routes in your controller action, or you don't fully understand what resources is doing for you. Now, remember what routes are. Routes are essentially just endpoints. Your Rails is going to match that endpoint, right? If I do a get to whatever here, Rails is going to check the routes for the get to the same place. If it exists, it points to a controller action. If I build routes that don't actually sort of point to anything in my app, I'm opening doors to my app where I have not written sort of the endpoint to. There are, I don't think at the current moment, any like possible exploits. I could be totally wrong. But what I don't want to do is make routes to my app that I don't either kind of control or have written sort of controller actions to. And so that's why you want to be very specific with your routing. You never want to just be like, oh, I'm going to do all the RESTful routes, but only write def index in my controller.
So just to top that one off, so resources, use it, but use only.
Or except, right? Like so there's only, but there's also except. So if I do something like except index, then if I go localhost 3000, Rails info routes, it'll give me everything but index, right? So resources is very helpful.
Grab this page,
You literally go to localhost 3000 Rails info routes.
Rails info routes.
Yeah, I'll send it to your class. It's a special URL. So yeah, I would say if you want to use resources, understand what it builds for you, but do not become reliant on resources muffins and then only build like the index for it. Use resources only index when you only have an index. You don't want to expose routes that you're not building controller actions to. Yeah, is that clear? All right, now, are we clear on, just by a quick thumbs up, how this form 4 is sort of defaulting to this muffins path URL and why we got the error and how just using resources openly kind of fixed it. All right, the question I have for you, and I'm gonna get to you, is without using resources, can you fix the error?
Yes, but you have to write helper methods, right?
You can do one of two things. You can either hard code the URL, or knowing that it's looking for something called muffins path, you build the helper muffins path into your routes. Yeah? Which question? Ooh,
My question was, if we were using resources only,
Mhm.
which of the 7 RESTful routes would we need to include in the only to fix this error?
It's going to be the one for muffins path. So which one would be the muffins path? Yeah.
So would it be okay, even if we just had create and new to include the index and the resources only, even though we don't actually have an index page, but we need it for create?
So that's a very good question. The question is, what if I had new and create, but it's still breaking because I don't have the get to / muffins for my muffins path helper. What I will say is, if you do something like index purely for its route, remember what resource builds for you. It builds the entire route and points to a controller action. If you don't have the controller action, should you build all of that just for the route? Whereas what makes more sense is if I need it just for the route, I'm just going to change this route. I'm just going to add a route. I'm going to change where this routes to, rather than let it be its default and then add the index and routes, which also points to a controller action that I haven't built. So here you're not exposing any additional routes, but using the resources you sort of will be. Okay. All right, great. That's all I have for you this morning. I appreciate your time.